Okay, we're live. So I'm Brice from Mile High Recovery Chat, here with my good buddy, Andrew Wainwright from AiRHealth Health.
Hi, Brice.
Hi, up in St. Paul, Minnesota. So usually I do the show with Lindsay Brady. She's on vacation, and we usually start with like this, an intro. I talk about who the guest is, how special they are and stuff, but we're just going to get into it. I know you from
Go ahead.
a long time ago. I mean, I was figuring it out today. I'm almost embarrassed to say it. It's over 30 years. Yeah. We went to college together, and I think there was a group of about 15 or 20 of us, right, that were close in college. And I won't speak for everybody, but our like close group we were just like underachievers in a way, right? Like, what do you think? How do you feel about your college career?
You mean, other than I wish I went to a different college and had different friends?
Maybe, yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know what other people's experience was like. I had a wonderful time in college.
Yeah.
I was good at it, right? I was good at the college part of college.
You're talking about drinking beer and chasing girls.
I am talking about that side of the house.
All right. Okay.
I had good friends, for those who are listening, Brice and I were friends in college, and then we lost touch for many, many years. And here's the miracle of recovery, right? On the far side, he ends up on this side of the fence years later. And I called him up and I'm like, I heard you got sober. But for many years in the middle, we were not, we were leading different lives. No, but to be honest, college was a wonderful time of my life, right? Somebody else paid the bills and I ran amok, and
it was fun, right? I remember it being very fun. And I don't know what you remember about me. I know I played music a lot and I wanted to be a rock star. And you were like really funny, and you were a very good writer, and you were very witty, and you always had the best nicknames for people. They weren't always very nice, but like that's what I remember. And me and you lived at the beach together, and we roomed together at the Hollywood house. And I just feel like I wasted, in a way, academically, I wasted 5 years. But for myself, like yourself, it was fun. I had fun.
No, I get it. So one of the years when I left you guys, I went away to Oxford for a year abroad, and I learned more in that 1 year than I did in the 4 years that I was in college with you guys.
You probably learned more the first week at Oxford than you did.
But I'll tell you, just for everybody who's listening, I want to tell one story about Brice, and not a crazy story, but a nice story. So, why Brice? Why were Brice and I friends? Why was anybody my friend? I wonder some days. I'm not sure I was, I'm not sure I was a great friend, but certain people seem to think so. So anyway, Brice played guitar, and I thought Brice was super cool, and he had a band, and he had all this stuff going on. So I wanted to play guitar, and there was acoustic guitars everywhere around in everyone's dorm room. So one time I was like, I'm going to learn to play the acoustic guitar, and I'm going to ask Brice. And I said, Brice, I want to know if you'll give me lessons. And somebody else who's a super smart aleck among our group of friends says, Brice, why are you going to waste your time? He's not going to learn anything. He's stupid, and he's never going to learn to play the guitar. Brice paused, thought about it for a second, and goes, I believe in Andrew. I think that this is going to work out, and he's going to learn to play the guitar. Now, we all know what happened is that I never learned to play the guitar. In fact, I own a guitar today that I still can't play. But here's the thing. The fact that you believed in me, right? You could have taken the easy swing at the, easy T-ball pitch, but you didn't, right? You said, no, I think he's really going to do it. And I think no matter what your story tells you about what kind of a depraved human being you became later on, I think that there was a big part of you that was extant then and is extant today, is that you look for the good in people and you have hope and faith. And that's what I remember about why we were friends for all those years.
It's interesting. I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Let's shift into addiction and recovery. Whenever I tell my story, I started drinking in high school, but the real meat of my alcoholism began the day that I entered that college, St. Mary's College. That's when I started blacking out on a daily basis. And that's when I started experimenting with drugs. And that I just remember there was like this like one semester where I was like, this is it. If I never do anything else with my life, like I just want to get drunk. And we all know how that turned out, right?
It was an extraordinary school. There's no question.
So I remember, I believe what happened is I graduated and moved to Baltimore to play music, and you guys stayed one more year.
Yes.
And that's when, and you could take the story from here. That's when you guys started doing like hard drugs, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and in my house in Georgetown, it was, it was a little bit of like a literary salon. Drinks were at 6, cocktails at 6, the back door was always open, dinner's at 7. If we weren't at Brice's house for a dinner party, if Brice was coming to my house for a dinner party, we were at the Chinese restaurant. So, it wasn't like mom and dad, having family dinner, right? That's how I grew up. So cigarettes, alcohol were a constant in my home. And so when I transitioned to college, I already thought that I was an adult, and I'd been drinking and smoking, for a long time. And I met wonderful people in college who introduced me to like quickly multiple other levels of insanity. So the RA in my hall, my mother drops me off, pats me on the head, gives me a hug. And half an hour later, the RA is, pouring alcohol down my throat and feeding me, marijuana through the Kong bong, the 6-foot bong that you can only take off the top bunk. And, it was literally half an hour from the time my mother left. And, it was straight downhill from there, or uphill, or, whatever. I was in for the ride. But yeah, so we drank a lot of beer. It was a good beer college. It was also, it was a very Grateful Dead college. So whether you are a rock and roll star and you had your own kind of band, everybody was a Grateful Dead person who wanted to be in on that scene, because that scene had certain special offerings that came with being part of that scene. So, I think we dabbled in that to a large degree. And for me, it became clear that I was allergic to alcohol, quickly. I think a lot of people told me that blacking out wasn't normal. And, looking back, all the signs and symptoms early on, at 19 years old, were clearly there. But I was able to power through and get through 5 years of college like everybody else. And, then get to grad school and make it to 26 years of age before I got tossed into treatment, which was, great. But yeah, it was pretty straight downhill from, smoking cigarettes to drinking beer, to drinking hard liquor, to, doing all of the drugs that were passed our way, till solely, the nightmare is it's only the hard drugs. And then it's just a constant flow of hard drugs until, the world gets super small.
And you crashed and burned before the rest of us, from what I remember. And I don't know if you remember this, but I was at a party in DC, and you were there with your girlfriend at the time. I won't name any names. And you guys had made this big plan. You're going to stop smoking crack, and you're just going to snort cocaine. And you guys were having this conversation. We're going to save so much money. It's going to be great. And then the next thing I know, a few months later, I heard, medevaced to a hospital and then flown to Minnesota. Was that true?
It wasn't exactly true, but I think it's a pretty.
It's a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story. I think for me, once I started using drugs and alcohol, a little was never enough. More was never enough. Just on the weekends, Thursday through Monday. And once you start hanging out with those people, they introduce you to those other people. And then you move, you slide sort of gently from hanging out at the college party with your friends to your street friends and doing street drugs. And then I spent a couple of years in DC, in a lifestyle that I didn't sign up for. This isn't the guy I wanted to be. I didn't want to have to go to work during the day in my shirt and tie and then dip down to the methadone clinic every day at lunch, right?
Right.
It's untenable. And after a year or so of that, it's just unsustainable, right? Your body doesn't hold up. And my body, neither my body nor my bank account, or luckily the relationships I had at the time, everything began to fall apart, which was great news. So by the fall of I was 26 years old, everybody knew that something was going on, and it was terrible, and the gig was close to being up. And finally someone called it. And I went to a hospital just outside of Washington, D.C. And I was lucky enough for them to come basically have an intervention on me in the hospital where they said, hey, there's this great opportunity if you want to take it. You can, either go out on the street and do your thing, or this other opportunity exists so you can go to treatment out in Minnesota. And but the real thing, though, is that, I was so sick on that particular day. If I had had $1 in my pocket, right, and they had opened the door, I would have gone to the right. I surely would have chosen that because it would have seemed reasonable, at the time. But I didn't, luckily. So I got on the plane with the folks that were escorting me, and they took me to drug and alcohol treatment in Minnesota. And right, so it's like end one chapter, the beginning of the next, because I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a job to go back to. I had all of you guys, which was my big loss, right? So for the next 5-10 years, I heard about everybody's weddings and everyone was together doing things. And that's a little bit like hearing things through Facebook, right? I only heard good stuff and I only missed you guys. I didn't know what was actually going on, right? I didn't get to be part of everybody else's depravity and their story. So I had to sort of, at 26, I started over again in Minnesota, and it was chapter 2.
Okay, so 26, right, you're right. You're not supposed to be on methadone, right? You're not supposed to be standing in line in DC at the methadone clinic at 26 years old with a college degree or 2. And so you got lucky enough to go to Hazelden in Minnesota. And you say it like a new chapter started. But it's a little more dramatic than that, right? It's not like, okay, here I go. Now I'm this sober dude. Like, and you did the deal. What? You did the deal. You did all the work. Like, I mean, you struggled for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, Brice, you just want the dirty details.
No, I want people like maybe an early sobriety is like thinking, well, that's just too easy.
Right. No, it's absolutely, yeah. No,
it's hard.
No, it's super hard. Right. So when, besides kicking drugs, right, which is hard in itself, right? So I ask anybody to detox from, methadone and all those kinds of things. It's insanity, right? Nobody would sign up for that. So you go through that, and then you're far away from friends and family in Minnesota, and you have to start over. It's like starting college again. I have to go buy new clothes. I have to make new friends. I have to figure out where the bus stop is. I mean, I got to do all the stuff, but I'm also filled with guilt, probably some shame, some remorse, anger, bitterness. They're all kicking around inside of me. So no, not easy. I would get this opportunity, this wonderful drug and alcohol treatment center. I go to, they want me to do a halfway house. I go to a halfway house for 4 months. I was very proud. They made me president of my halfway house. I called my mother, told her, 27, I'm president of the halfway house. But the truth was, I'd already relapsed. And for the next 6-9 months, I'm taking dirty chips in AA because all my guys that I know are going to AA. So I'm trooping along to the meeting, we're going out to dinner, we're having coffee. And I'm owning the fact that I had this relapse. And so I didn't get sober until a year later. When I exploded everything in a 24-hour, like 1,000 suns went off, and came crawling back. And the great opportunity there, the moment of clarity was on the way back from that relapse. I'm making my way back to St. Paul to the apartment I lived in. I said to myself, and I said out loud to the person who's the car with me, I said, I can't do this anymore. I mean, it was just a period, end of sentence. I can't do this anymore. I'm not willing to lie, cheat, and steal, and do all the things that I knew perfectly well how to do. But it was time to not do that anymore. So I did the inverse, and I called somebody I knew, and they said, they laughed at me, and they said that I was a fool. And how was I feeling? And then they said, you should come with me to a recovery meeting the next night, which I did. And then the morning after that, some guys picked me up and asked if I wanted to go be of use and service at a drug and alcohol treatment center. And I did that. And so, yeah, you talk about doing the deal. That's hours of testimony in itself. This one foot in front of the other, walking on the broad highway, doing the next right thing. It's years of hard work. So you were talking about 24 years ago. I shaved today. This is a clean shirt. Like, I feel like a human being, and it's taken a little while to get here, right? So to your point, no, it didn't happen magically overnight.
Right. And it's not glamorous, especially when you're first sober, especially you at 26 and all your friends are still out there partying, right? But I don't care who you are or how old you are when you finally do it. When you first start getting sober, it's not glamorous. It doesn't feel great. You might feel a little physically better periodically, but for a real alcoholic, in my experience, you feel worse. You're depressed, you're anxious, angry, you have the social anxiety, you don't like anybody. But if you sit in it, right, you sit on your hands and you don't pick up and you make new friends and you kind of like slowly this new life kind of develops. And then, you know, one day you just kind of wake up and you like the desire to use and drink it for myself was gone. And I had this new life that I appreciated and I was grateful for. And I still do, you know. I don't miss drinking and I don't miss using. Like if a doctor said, you can go ahead and do it again, I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
no, I think there's a piece of that first year, and there's 1,000 ways to represent it, but you know, they always have these news stories where these guys go out fishing and then the boat turns over in a storm and the four of them are holding on to the upside down boat and they're holding on for like 2 days, and you know, one guy can't go on and then the next, and then it's down to like they rescue one guy out of the four. And they're like, you know, what happened? And he's like, I just, you know, everybody else quit or couldn't hang on, or, you know, the big strong guy, he let go first. And all the people you think are going to make didn't make it. Well,
yeah,
it was a little bit like that. I was like, I'm just not going to let go. But it was terrible. I mean, it was, you know, whatever kind of storm you want it to be, it was stormy for a year while I watched other people get knocked off the boat. And I was like, it's just not going to be me today.
yeah. All right. So congratulations. So first, well, I mean, hey, it's like, it's amazing. And just to be able to do this, have this conversation with you on like a live stream podcast and like be present that I'm actually doing this is kind of crazy. Don't you think?
I think if you've gone back to when both of us were 18 and there's a picture that I think, I'm sure your audience, I told you you're going to have to show your audience this picture.
I put it on there. I put it on Facebook.
Beautiful. So, yeah, if you went back to that time and said, here's these two 18-year-old kids, what's going to happen, right? Like, how does all of this play out? I mean, no one would have picked you and I. I'm not saying there's a top or a bottom, but to be living, you know, reasonable, accommodated lives where we're happy with the people that we are and trying to be of use and service to the people around us. I don't think Brice and Andrew would have been in the top two, but, you know, that's part of hanging onto the boat too. You never know what's going to happen. If you let go, you sure shouldn't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But the possibility exists, you know, around every corner. So,
right.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited we're here too. I was excited when I heard that you had gotten sober. I remember this, and I called you up just to find out if it was true. I don't know, I got your number somewhere, and you were, you know, distanced and quiet and in your head, and I was just glad to hear your voice. And then I think I sort of stalked you and chased you for a couple of months and kept calling you, and I have no idea why. Right? I didn't want anything from this except for I guess maybe I wanted my friend Brice back, and so I feel like you and I both worked hard at this friendship, you know, over the last, how long you've been sober? 8 years, 10 years?
8, almost 8. I remember the conversation. You said something to the line of, I'm glad you're sober and I love you. Oh. That's what you said. And for me, it was like, oh, okay. It was kind of like, you know, come be my sober friend. And I hadn't considered that do you know what I mean? Because when my first year, it was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm going to do, right? But you were kind of like, you know, we can be friends again, but like really be friends, because when you're an alcoholic, an active alcoholic, you really can't. It's hard, like, to be friends with somebody who's sober from active alcoholism, right? But I remember it. So I want to shift into your job. They offered you a job because you know more about this than anybody that I know, and you can speak about it very eloquently, and because you have experience as a professional and as, you know, a guy in recovery yourself. But you started, what were you, a BHT?
What's BHT?
Behavioral health tech.
Yeah, so I was a couple of years sober. I needed a job, and I was an electrician. I was a apprentice electrician. So this guy got me a job, and I'm getting on the back of the truck every day, and, you know, we're wiring people's houses, and it's fine, you know, making a living, and I'm feeling worthwhile because I'm bringing home the bacon for the first time in my life, you know, with, you know, actual work that I'm doing. But I started to transition to do something different, and they hired me as a tech at the halfway house, which for my dollar was the best job I ever had. I mean, it was hilarious because there's 55 crazy people running around in front of you on a daily basis. It's just a giant shenanigans Inc. And everybody is running game. And if you know what's actually going on, you can read the room. It's hilarious. And
Yeah, I do that for a living. Now, I have 8 halfway houses. 8, they call them sober houses now, right? But and so yeah, so from there, what did you do? How did you? Because there must have been like a period where you're like, I'm good at this, and because you started becoming, you're like an entrepreneur at heart, I think, right?
here's what I think. I think I'm lazy at heart. Like I eat the food that's put in front of me, right? I think that maybe it's good fortune, right? That I take what's offered to me. So this job being an electrician, I was dating this girl at the time, and she told me that I should get a job outside because I had a job indoors in a bookstore. So I went to the other tech at the halfway house and said, I need a job outside. She goes, this guy's hiring, needs somebody to work. That's how I got the job as the electrician. A buddy of mine offered me the job as the tech. The next job I got after that was working for this guy doing intervention work, Dr. James Fearing. I got it because it was a month before Christmas. I'd just gotten out of the hospital. I'm laid up at home. I got no money. Christmas is coming on. And a woman calls me out of the blue. A friend of mine said, I heard you're looking for a job. I know a guy that's looking for a guy. I called him up. He gave me the job. And so that began the years with Dr. James Fearing. So I was with him for maybe 4 years, I think, doing drug and alcohol intervention work. And then when he died, I got almost every job I got because somebody died. So James dies. The treatment center calls me up and says, hey, we heard that James died. We heard that you're the guy behind the guy. We want you to do the work. And so that kicked off the first iteration of addiction intervention resources in 2002. So, is it luck? I'm sure it's not ambition. I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Maybe, but you stepped up to the plate.
Yes.
I mean, doing interventions is a hustle, right? It's hard.
It's a super hustle. It's toxic. Okay. It's hard. And so the interesting thing about that work was in the late 90s, intervention wasn't a thing, right? It didn't exist. It existed
before the show.
Before the show, yeah. So it existed in the 70s and the 80s, and it's a long story about the fallout of the treatment industry in the 90s, but intervention and the Johnson Institute all fell apart in the 90s as well. So James was this like sort of last guy out there doing the work, and he brought me on, and so I was doing the work for him locally and then nationally. And then when he died and went away, and I started the first iteration of the shop, we became quickly the first national sort of addiction consulting company to do this work and to take phone calls from mom and dads, across the United States and around the world who needed people to solve problems for them. This is also the beginning of the internet. So like today, I think if you try and put up a website, you have a lot of competition. Back then, we had no competition. So, we became popular and well-known, and we had a lot of explosive growth over, a short few years. So I think, once again, we were in the right place at the right time. We had the gas station when they put the highway through, and it was a fun time. We did, so the first thing I did, I was never a clinician. I said, I'm good at this work. But if we're actually going to run an ice cream stand and sell real ice cream to real little kids, we got to have the right people doing it. So we went out and hired all the best and brightest clinicians we could, and built, hopefully, a first-rate addiction consulting company in St. Paul, and it became a, sort of a big shop for a while. We were, it was fun.
So it was mostly interventions, or was it all interventions?
So it's like everything. It started out being drug and alcohol interventions because at the time the drug and alcohol treatment centers were the ones that got us started. But quickly they would get calls from Brice's mom, and they would say, my son's not smoking pot or doing anything, but he's having, he's speaking in tongues, and he's having a meltdown. He's in the psych ward. So any call that the drug and alcohol facilities didn't want to take, they then sent to us. So all of a sudden we became the guys where the paved road ended and the dirt road began in the deep, dark forest, who would do the work. And our internal motto was, listen, we all had moms that had to call somebody, right? And they needed great advice. And at least for those of us there at the time, they found it because we had all, gotten sober one way or another. And so the commitment was, we will always answer the phone, right? We will answer the phone 24/7, 365 for anybody that calls, whether they have money or not, and we'll do our best to help them. So yeah, our expertise was in drugs and alcohol, but then we went and hired smart people that knew a lot about eating disorders and, straight psych. And we became friends with facilities around the world that were expert in those areas. So yes, it grew to all of behavioral health.
So all right. So at one point it shifted though for you, right? Like instead of like talking people into going to treatment, you started to realize that what people in crisis, what families in crisis want is like what you say, they want their loved one to be sober or clean or having a high quality life 5 years down the road, right? And you realize that there was a problem with the healthcare system around substance use disorder, and you shifted into a case management company.
Yeah, I think it was a natural shift, sort of based upon that same idea that if mothers like our mothers were going to call and ask for help, we had to help them. And in our world, that meant actually help them, right? Not just take their money or, run a claim or, and so we were in the private pay world, and we could effectively do what we wanted. But when I got sober, I was lucky enough. My mother sent me to a facility that right away they identified that just going away for 28 days wasn't enough, and they sent me to a halfway house for 4 months. And then I got piloted into the St. Paul Recovering Community, which met me with open arms and took care of me. So this is before the world of we have today, where there's like, a lot more sober living and a lot more opportunity for extended care. So I happened to stumble into long-term care management just by happenstance, by the path I took. What we were finding in the early aughts was that wasn't true for everybody. There was a lot of so people, Brice's mother would call and say, my kid got kicked out of college for smoking pot, and he's in jail, and we're scared to death, and we don't know what to do. And we want him to go, let's say, to Hazelden or Betty Ford or Father Martin's, what she wanted. But she did not have it in her, in her lexicon to ask for what she wanted. So what she really wanted was not to get her 18-year-old son stabilized and detoxed. She wanted to get her 18-year-old son to be a 25-year-old young man who was married, happy, filled with joy, doing something that he loved, right? But she didn't know to ask me for that. Because if I gave her what she wanted, which I just transported you to a treatment center and left you alone, it was a little bit of a flip of a coin. In fact, it's 1 out of 4, right? There's one chance out of 4 that at any primary treatment facility, you're going to actually stay sober long-term. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, except for it's poor medicine. But what was bad for me was that 6 months later, your mother would call me back and she'd be like, Andrew, it's Mrs. Hancock. Do you remember me? I'm like, absolutely. I love you. How's Brice doing? And she said, unfortunately, he's drinking and smoking pot again. And so she wouldn't be mad at me because I did all the things that she asked me to do. But she would be sad, and her husband would be sad, and the rest of the brothers and sisters would be sad, and it would make me sad, especially because I was sober, right? I'd had that same experience, but I hadn't gone left, I'd gone right, and I'd stayed clean. And so we began to discern what's the difference. And as we teased all this out, the real difference maker is that people don't get sober in a day or a week or a month. They get sober in a year, right? It takes a year for our brains to make serotonin and come back to life the way we need them to be, right, prior to the way we abuse them. But in our healthcare system today, we're not set up to keep people in treatment for a year. So we were missing some CPT codes there to drive care, over the course of a year. So what we're really talking about was instituting a chronic care model for a chronic illness. And what we have today is we have acute care, point of care solutions for a chronic illness, which it's the wrong way to treat it. So back to your mother. What we began to learn was it wasn't enough to just sell her that we would take some money from her to pick you up at the hospital and take you to treatment. It was incumbent upon me to sell her on what I knew that she wanted, sell her on what I knew that she needed, not what she wanted. Because what she wanted was to pay some money and fix it and cross her fingers. What I wanted for her was to take a deep breath and do the hard work of understanding this was going to take longer, be harder, and probably not what she wanted to do for a longer period of time. But if she did that, then she would actually get what she wanted and what she deserves from the healthcare system, which is a kid who's in remission, right? That's what we want. Just like with cancer, we want the cancer to go away. We want it to be in remission. This idea that even as a chronic illness, that it has to be relapsing and remitting, that people have to go up and down, I think it's fallacious, right? It's my experience that people can stay in remission, and that there's work that you can do to keep yourself in remission for long periods of time. So that's how we got into case management. It just became too hard for us to take those phone calls. We said, if we're going to stay in this business, we have to craft some solutions that we can sell to Mrs. Hancock and all the other Mrs. Hancocks, because, you know, solutions exist, and to not give them to people is unethical.
Sure. I get it, and I love it, and I like when you talk about it. So we're out of time, but so this is a 4-part. I know it's a 4-part series. This is number 1. And then on the 4th one, we're going to bring Craig Lasser, which is going to be awesome. But for the next 2, I want to talk about just an overview of what we think about in our society, in our culture, when somebody's on drugs, how we get them sober. And then I want, because you don't work for the treatment center. You that's a business model. They are trying to run people through in 28 days, right? They're trying to keep them for 28 days, and then they're trying to get them out the other side. That's their business model. That's fine. And that's assess, stabilize, detox, right? It's great. But you're talking about getting somebody well, clean, sober, the disease in remission, hopefully forever. If not, they can get themselves back in recovery. And so you're going to talk about how to get somebody and keep somebody sober and keep their disease in remission, their illness in remission. And I don't know exactly how we're going to navigate it the next 2 shows, but I want to have anybody that watches all 4 to have this new understanding of what it is and what it takes and what somebody's life looks like to go through a year at least of some kind of health, what do you call it? Care, managed care, extended health care.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's healthcare. I'm not sure that we have a great healthcare system in the United States today, right? We have a reactive system that is in the business of keeping people alive, right? That's different than a proactive healthcare system. And you know, we're not pointing fingers here. We're just saying this hasn't been addressed yet. There's been lots of other areas of healthcare that have gotten a wonderful love and attention, and things have improved dramatically. And it's my experience that the solutions are easy. They're extant. You know, we don't have to call Elon Musk to invent it for us. You know, we just need to put them into practice. And there's lots of standard practice models that are available today. And I've been doing it for 20 some years, right? And I'm a big believer. And I don't think that I'm selling, you know, wacky jello. I think this is the real deal.
I'm with you. So we're going to do that. The next 2 shows, we're going to talk about how to get somebody and keep somebody sober, what it looks like. And because you kind of have to design your own system, you know what I mean? Because like you said, you can't charge insurance for a year to keep somebody. And that doesn't really help anyway, to keep somebody in treatment away from society for a year, right? They have to reintegrate. And so we're going to talk about that. And hopefully, if somebody, a parent or a loved one of somebody in active addiction watches all 4, they'll go, "Oh, I get it." You know what I mean? I get it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, you got to be a lamplighter, right? We have to put ourselves out there a little bit to say that there's a lot of mythology out there talking about how people with any form of behavioral health illness don't get well, right? The depressed stay depressed, and the folks off the meds are never going to get back on the meds, and alcoholics are always going to, you know, be alcoholic and ruin relationships and stuff. And that's also just not my experience. My experience is the inverse, is that people in the tens of millions get well, and remission's infinitely possible for all of us. And I just don't think our system's set up for it today, and I'm happy to share what I know.
Okay.
Thanks for inviting me on. I'm glad you're my friend.
I'm glad you're my friend too, man. All right. Thanks. We're going to come back. We'll be back here next Thursday at 6:30. And I believe Lindsay will be here.
All right.
See ya.